We are back at Benedicto. We are diving the canyon again today before we start the crossing tonight back to Cabo. As had become the norm, the dive plan was basically the same as before. Drop down, head down to a cleaning station, and if we saw anything off into the blue, go out and hopefully run into hammerheads. Right off the bat, conditions did look a little bit clearer than the first time we'd been there. And of course, it was way clearer than the now legendary horchata dive. The first dive, honestly, we had the most fun with these guys. They would actually let you get close enough you could poke them if you weren't careful. It wasn't until dive number 2 where a manta showed up. Now, they're really cool to see. We were also joking at this point about how many experiences we'd had on various dives where one would hang around and play with us for 20 or 30 minutes. We were somewhat surprised when our guide, instead of watching the manta, suddenly pointed and then took off into the blue. At first, I wasn't sure what he had seen, and we followed him rapidly out into the blue water, meaning we didn't have anything below us or anywhere around for a frame of reference. All we could see was the ceiling of the surface way above. Then we started to see the outline of hammerheads barely at the edge of our vision. We could see their outlines, and every now and then we got a better look at them, but we were still just seeing a few, until all of a sudden, the video didn't come out real well just because of how deep we are, how gloomy it was, but briefly we were basically in the middle of maybe 200 hammerheads. I don't know how long we were with them, but eventually they just kind of disappeared into the gloom. We did try and follow them for a little while, but basically that was it for that dive. It was really amazing in person, and after that we were all running on a high for the next dive. In fact, one guy was so excited he actually forgot his mask on board when we left, triggering the boat to give him the dreaded pollo, which he had to wear for the remainder of that dive. Unfortunately, while we all hoped to get back into the hammerhead swarm, we basically didn't see any for the remainder, at least until the 4th dive when we ran across just 1 or 2. Fortunately, there were always plenty of other cool things to look at, including more quality time with mantas. And then, sadly, it was time to surface. At least until we got to Cabo, where we had one other follow-up dive planned. Drinking and diving tend not to go together real well, and in fact, on almost every dive boat I've been on, they tell you if you're drinking, you're done diving for the day. This was the first one where after the final dive, they actually met us on the Zodiac with drinks. Once we were all safely on the boat, the driver had a little cooler filled with Mexican beer and soda for us. In addition to the beer they gave us on the Zodiac, the guy that was serving the meals every night was wandering around with shot glasses and tequila. The one who's cold is wearing nothing. The one that is so blazing hot is wearing all the things. Once everybody was cleaned up, we all kind of hung out up top, and one person even broke out some mezcal, which Taters didn't care for. As we left the protection of San Benedicto, it also got really, really rough. And while I'm not usually one to get seasick, I actually, after briefly trying to eat dinner, decided to just go to my bunk and take one of Tater's seasickness pills. And no, it was not from excess drinking. Things finally calmed down. That might have been the roughest night I've been on the boat. I was actually worried if the boat was going to be okay. Again, since the islands are 200 plus miles out from Cabo, we basically had an entire day just hanging out on the boat and waiting. We arrived back in Cabo San Lucas early the next day, and it was quite the production exiting the boat. A few other people were visiting other places in Mexico. Most people were just planning to head home, but I had convinced Jen that we had just enough time to get off the boat at 7:30, walk across the road, and do an attempt at the 130-foot deep dive at Gordo Banks. The dive is on an undersea pinnacle, and if you're lucky, down at 130 feet, you basically see hammerhead sharks circling around this pinnacle. You can't stay very long because it's so deep, but I was actually impressed by all the safety protocols these guys had in place. Since your margin for error that deep is much smaller, you had to be certified for deep diving. You had to have done a checkout dive with them, which in our case was the warm-up dives before we had got on the Quino, and they had a buoy going with them the entire way, just in case we were swept out into open ocean so the boat could find and recover us. Unfortunately, as we dropped down, our nervous excitement quickly turned into disappointment as the water got murky, and by the time we were down below 100 feet, we basically had maybe 5 foot of visibility. Now, when you're diving in the ocean, you never really know what you're going to get till you drop down and see, but it was a pretty big bummer. There were 2 dives as part of our package. Hopes were low for the second one, and then things got even worse as I started having sharp stabbing pains in my stomach during the surface interval. It didn't get any worse after a couple of minutes, so I wasn't worried too much, but I decided it was not prudent to go back down to 130 feet, especially with the chance of actually seeing anything cool being pretty much nil. This was at a second site, so there was maybe some hope that the visibility would be a little better, but if anything, it was even worse. Jen did the dive with the other guests and the guide while I sat on the boat and visited with the boat captain, hoping my stomach wasn't going to get any worse. If you're curious, this is what Jen's computer does when you're down at 130 feet, and it's warning you that you don't have much time and not to go any deeper. Obviously, that was kind of a downer note to end the trip on, but hey, at least we tried. After washing our gear and letting it drip dry for a little while, we got a ride across town and checked into a hotel for one more night. So I really wanted the hotel that had complimentary room guacamole. It was only a couple $1,000 more than where we're staying, but Jen was like, no, we're not doing that, even though they give you a person to do things for you. So here I am, making the best of the situation. We may not have room guacamole, but unlimited water filled by a person. Jen is having a stroke over there. Her eyes just closed for about 12 seconds. I'm more worried about her. Sadly, I was a stick in the mud and didn't want the hotel known for bed bugs. Like seriously, all the Google reviews were just bed bugs. So we have an ocean view. Wait for it. You kind of come out here. Ocean view. More of a construction view with incidental ocean, if you ask me, but also, while Jen said no to room guacamole, we do have room water jug. I've been trying to celebrate what we have rather than dwelling on not having room guac. It's because I am a shirtless optimist. A realistic optimist. I wanted room walk very, very much, but Jen was like, no. So here I am, fully celebrating that water jug, and she's just been like, eye roll, eye roll.
We got really good food yesterday, including good guacamole.
Yeah, we've been in Cabo spending $50 per meal, and we got one good meal. And now, sadly, we are about to take off for the airport. Little known fact, Taters really likes carrying dive suitcases up and down stairs. After a short flight, we landed in Tijuana, grabbed our luggage, didn't have to argue with Mexico TSA this time about how our regulators were weapons, made the crossing back over to San Diego, and back to our rental in Hemet, just in time to kick off our 10-week winter backpacking course for the Sierra Club, which would keep us busy until it was time to get back on trail.